This week, a former State Security Agency Director General Arthur Fraser revealed startling allegations when he opened a criminal case against President Cyril Ramaphosa for concealing the alleged theft of $4 million in cash at his farm in Limpopo. The Democratic Alliance says the president's response to the allegations raises more questions than answers. To this end, the DA will be taking several steps to get to the bottom of this issue. Joining us to discuss this further is the federal leader for the DA, John Steenhuisen. John, thank you so much for your time, and of course, thank you for joining us on Channel 405 this morning. As I mentioned there in my introduction, you know, the party does feel as though the story has created more questions, or at least has given South Africans more questions than answers. But as an organization, what's your response to some of the claims we've seen, and of course the response from the Office of the Presidency?
Well, first of all, I'd like to start by saying this is very clearly an opening salvo in the internal factional battles for control of the ANC's Congress later this year. But nevertheless, I believe that the charges and the allegations that have been made certainly warrant further investigation. And I'm afraid the response by the presidency, firstly to say that this was a smear campaign, and then yesterday to issue a remarkable statement saying the president's not going to talk about this anymore, I think raise many, many more questions that have been answered by this. And I really would like to urge the president to make a full, open and transparent account of what has happened here, because these releases are not reflecting well on the presidency, and running to ground and not talking about the matter is not going to make it go away. And I think the South African citizens and the public need to know exactly what the situation is here, because in the absence of the facts, obviously speculation is going to set in. To that end, we've obviously concerned about why a large sum of foreign currency was stored at the home of the president. It certainly stinks to high heavens that this was the situation. Why would such a large sum of foreign currency be there? Why was it in furniture, not at the bank? Why was this not reported to the SAPS and a case opened to pursue the alleged perpetrators of the crime? And why are the allegations of hush money being paid if everything was above board? So it very clearly looks like there is a lot of questions that the president's going to have to answer and take South Africa into his confidence, because at the moment, this thing looks really messy. It doesn't reflect well on the president, and it certainly doesn't reflect well on his oath of office to uphold the constitutional law of the Republic. So we've asked SARS to look at the tax implications of where this money came from. Was it ever banked? Did it ever flow? Was it ever taxed? The second thing is the South African Reserve Bank are responsible for currency control in South Africa. Why was such a large sum of foreign currency here? How did it get into the country? Was it ever registered with the South African Reserve Bank? How long had it been in the president's possession? These are very, very important questions, because there are laws and regulations governing the holding of foreign currency in South Africa. The president is the #1 citizen in the country, and he should be leading by example. And I'm afraid I think the conduct of the presidency over the last 72 hours has done very little to inspire confidence in the people of South Africa that everything here is above board.
Well, John, let's talk about some of the questions that were indeed answered by the Office of the Presidency. One of those being the question around the figure itself, the figure of $4 million. I mean, the presidency spokesperson, Vincent Magwenya, publicly stating that that figure is, in fact, hugely, grossly inflated. And so you already have the presidency distancing itself from the figure itself. Another answer to some of the questions that were asked, certainly regarding this particular story, is why the president didn't, in fact, report the incident. We know that the presidency has said that the matter was escalated to the Presidential Protection Unit, and at that point it should have been handled by those officials in that particular unit. I mean, as an organization, what's your response to that? Because it does seem as though the president feels that that is a satisfactory enough answer for South Africans.
Well, it's not satisfactory. If it is an inflated amount, can the presidency give us the exact figure of the money that was stolen? It's unthinkable and frankly bizarre and absurd to have a huge stash of foreign currency in your house and you don't know how much it is. So if it wasn't 4 million, the presidency must tell us exactly how much it was. Why you say it's grossly exaggerated and not give the public the actual figure? The second thing is reporting it to the Presidential Protection Unit is not opening a case with the SAPS. Why has a case number not been allocated to this case? If you look at the Namibian angle that is now being added in, where it looks like the Presidential Protection Unit head went into Namibia and conducted what would appear to be the president's private business at state expense to try and recover some of this money and to deal with the perpetrators, well, I think that we need to ask questions about that as well. And that is why I say there are many, many more questions that are being asked now as a result of the presidency's response than actually people saying, yes, well, actually that makes sense, we're satisfied. So we need to know what that figure is. Why was a case never opened? Was a case number allocated? Was it ever investigated? What was the outcome of that investigation? The president's response that he didn't want to cause panic. Well, I think that anyone looking at the latest crime statistics that came out this week can't do anything but panic with the state of crime and criminality in the country. And I think that this is an excuse being used by the presidency to come out. Look, who knows? This all may well be above board. But the reality is that until the president makes a full, open, transparent declaration about exactly the timeline of events, where the money came from, why a case wasn't opened, this speculation is going to continue to fill the newspaper columns and the airways of your channel. And I would really urge the president to play open cards with the citizens of the Republic. He is the president, and I think we deserve a full and proper answer to these allegations.
Well, talking about speculation, some analysts have sort of reduced these developments that we're seeing to just another case of ANC internal squabbles are playing out in our public institutions. And I'm wondering, as a party, I mean, what do you make of that? These are the very same public institutions that the president has openly saying that he's committed to rebuilding. He is committed to ensuring that they rebuild their integrity and their independence. And yet, you know, the very same individual, the very same figure seems to be flouting or at least disregarding the roles that those institutions play in safeguarding South Africa and its democracy. It does seem that there's a bit of a disconnect and a dissonance, certainly with regards to the messaging from the president and his actual actions.
Well, I think the presidency is trying very hard to just make the South African public think this is just an internal ANC spat. And the genesis of it may well have been there. But there's two major problems with the president, that the president has in this case. The Prevention of Organised Crime and Combating Corrupt Activities Act, which is a law of the Republic, which the president swore to uphold, has clearly been violated. If you know of a crime and you don't report it, it is a criminal offence. There are also the South African Reserve Bank Act and the South African Revenue Services Act. These are both pieces of legislation. The second trouble that he has is that it's very difficult for him now to discredit Mr. Fraser, because when the DA challenged his decision to put Mr. Fraser in as the head of correctional services, we took him to court and we said this is not a fit and proper person. Well, the president himself deposed an affidavit singing the virtues of Mr. Fraser and telling the court that Mr. Fraser was a good public servant and an honest man, and that is why he appointed him. So it's going to be very difficult now for the president to now turn around after submitting an affidavit to the courts extolling the virtues of Mr. Fraser to now turn around and say, well, Mr. Fraser is not a good man and that he is behaving unlawfully. We pointed all of this out to the president at the time. Why he chose to appoint Mr. Fraser to the position of correctional services is perhaps now coming a bit more clearer, because clearly he has information on the president and others within government that he's gathered through the Principal Agent Network program. So these are the problems the president faces now. And until he makes a full and proper account of these things, this thing is going to stay smelly and it's going to continue to attract attention.
Well, your organization, or you've been quoted at least, saying that your organization will ensure that this does not just end up as another ANC cover-up. And I want us to have a bit of a conversation around that. You know, the sort of fickle-mindedness that I think a lot of South Africans perhaps have with major developments like this. We're very quick to move on to the next big story as the news cycle continues. By next week, there'll be other torrid events that we'll be focused on. And so how do we ensure that we keep our eyes on these developments and ensure that they don't just get swept, under the rug? And we don't, in fact, accept this answer that we've received from the Office of the Presidency as the be-all and end-all of this story.
Yeah, look, I think there are two challenges here with this. First of all, there's a tendency to sanctify Mr. Ramaphosa because he's compared to Mr. Zuma. And I think that would be a terrible error. Yes, Mr. Zuma committed terrible acts and the like, but just because he was bad doesn't mean that we should turn a blind eye to allegations against Mr. Ramaphosa. I think we've got to look at the position that the person holds, the trust that's placed in them by the people of South Africa, and their constitutional obligations. And in this instance, it's our duty to hold Mr. Ramaphosa accountable in the same way we would as the opposition, the media, civil society, if it was Mr. Zuma who was standing accused of this. So we must be careful not to sanctify the president, because it is important that the rule of law principle that all are equal before the law is upheld. The second thing is, you're right, the news cycle moves very, very quickly. I mean, who even remembers Nkandla these days, the Waterkloof landing? We move very, very quickly as we're buttressed and buffeted by revelations of huge amounts of corruption. So it is very important to keep these things on the tracker. To our end, we will obviously wait for the responses from the South African Reserve Bank and SARS. If there is further action that's required from a legal perspective, or whether any other agencies we believe could bring to bear on this particular situation, we will do so. I mean, we like a dog with a bone. That's why we've pursued Mr. Zuma doggedly through the courts for the last decade and had the charges reinstated and had the spy tapes released. And we're not going to let this go, which is why it is absolutely essential that the president, if this is an innocent situation, if it's as above board as his spokesperson is making it out to be, well, come out with the facts. Give us the timeline. Who did you get the money from? Where did it flow to? Where did it go? Did you pay tax on it? Was the case opened? If so, who was the investigating officer? Did you send the Presidential Protection Unit into Namibia to collude with their agencies? These are all things that need to be answered. And they can be dealt with very quickly. The president can kill this story within 24 hours in the news cycle by coming out and taking South Africans into his confidence about exactly what the circumstances are. The mealy-mouthed attempts at deflection that have come out in the last two statements from the presidency, he needs to understand are not going to cut it. Not for the opposition, not for the media, and not for the citizens of the Republic.
Well, Police Minister Begekile has recently revealed that the Hawks are, in fact, investigating the allegations regarding this robbery that took place on the president's farm. Your response as an organization to the fact that it does seem our elite crime-fighting unit is looking into this, how quickly should we expect the unit to, in fact, move with its investigations?
Well, I would hardly call the Hawks an elite crime-fighting unit, given their disastrous track record at securing convictions. I think we need to know when that case was opened. When was it referred to the Hawks? And also, this happened in 2020. Why are we sitting now trying to play catch-up to get answers? Surely if there's been an investigation that's been ongoing for 2 years, there's slightly more information that could be made available than what is in the public domain. So, good luck to the Hawks. But I think we need to understand, and I think the media need to ask them, how long have you had this case? And why has it taken you 2 years? And the media have made more progress in the last 72 hours than you've made in 2 years. I think this is a very important question.
All right, we'll leave it there. Thank you very much. That's leader of the Democratic Alliance, John Steenhuisen, joining us there to talk to us about the letters addressed to the South African Reserve Bank and SARS concerning developments with regards to the president's robbery on his farm in Limpopo.